Welcome to Design Downtime, the podcast where we celebrate the joys of living a balanced creative life. I'm your host, Guy Siegel, a design director in Toronto, Canada, and I invite you to join me on this journey as we redefine what it means to be a successful design professional. Let's break free from the shackles of hustle culture and embrace the full spectrum of human experience, because life is too precious to be spent only in pursuit of productivity. Today, I'm delighted to talk to Helen Gaskell. Helen is a freelance lead content designer based in the UK. After 10 years at the BBC as a content producer, she now works on gov.uk projects and has spent time at over a dozen central government departments. Most notably, she worked on the first public-facing AI-driven project for the Foreign Office and wrote the UK government's guidance on AI for services. Helen, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here. Hello.
I'm super excited because I get to hype your book.
Yeah, I'm super excited because you hyping my book too. Although, well, I used to think there wasn't a huge overlap between design and romantic novels, but I'm pretty sure most of my pre-orders came from content designers. So yes, my book, The Regency Switch, published by HarperCollins in last February. And I've got another one coming up next year that's just gone off for copy edit. I'm officially a romantic novelist, which is so much fun and so awesome.
That is wonderful. I must admit, I don't know too much about the world of romantic novels, but I plan to change that completely within the next half hour.
I can promise you that, yeah.
I always like to start with the origin story. Like, how did you even get to writing a romantic novel?
Oh, well, this is only a half-hour podcast, so I hope you're buckled in. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I always wanted to write a romantic novel because my grandmother used to have a big stash of romantic novels by a lady called Georgette Heyer. So after I was really into Pride and Prejudice as a tween. I think pretty much everyone goes through that phase at some point in their life. And Georgette Heyer were very chaste, very ladylike, but quite fun little novels that were suitable for me to read, but also very sweet and romantic. But I never thought that I'd actually write a romantic novel. So I don't know, it felt like too big of a goal, right? Apparently working for government organisations and the BBC, that's totally achievable, but romantic novels seemed like too much of a stretch, because I always imagined romantic novelists as being these kind of older ladies lying on chaise lounges with like Chanel twin sets and maybe like a little puffy dog and the pearls, the cigarette on a holder, bright red lipstick, kind of lying there like my grandmother actually. But I thought, no, that I'm not that. But then during COVID, I had my COVID thing. I don't know, we all had something, right? And for most people, I think it was like sourdough. But I got really addicted to this mobile phone game called Lily's Garden, which is just like a match 3 game, kind of like Candy Crush, but it has a story. And I felt, having played lots of these games, that the story for Lily's Garden was way too good. I just kind of thought, like, the stories on all the others are really, really badly written. It doesn't need to be good, and yet it is. So I wrote a fan letter, and the only way I could find to get them my fan letter, because I felt like a Google review was not enough, bearing in mind it was COVID. These people need to know that I love their game. It's so important. I must thank them. I'm so British. I must say thank you effectively and thoroughly. So I wrote a fan letter to the writers, and yeah, there was no email address on their website. It's made by a company called Tactile Games based in Denmark. And the only way I could get hold of them was through their CV, like their website, what do you call it? Applicant tracking system, right? So I attached my thank you letter to my CV and just put a few page breaks in and uploaded it to a random job. And it said designer on it. And I'm a content designer, so it's like, fine, maybe it'll get through applicant tracking, it'll make it. And I then got an email from them saying, I would like to speak to you. So I spoke to this lady. She was so friendly. She's like, so I hear you like writing. I'm like, yeah. Told her a bit about my life, about my content design and stuff. And she said, oh, would you like to talk to our writers? I was like, hell yeah, I'd like to talk to writers. I just want to say thank you, like, for their amazing work. So I had like a kind of meeting with their writers. I was asking them questions, and they said, would you like to try writing an episode? I was so excited. I wrote them an episode. I had the loveliest time. The next thing I know, I'm on a one-to-one call with the CEO, and that's when I realized I was being interviewed. So I ended up quitting content design and working for a games company in Denmark. Bearing in mind I'm based in the UK, they shipped me out to Denmark for a week every month and put me up in a special apartment, and they fed me, paid all my expenses, took me to Michelin-starred restaurants. It turns out I way prefer content design to games writing. But because it was a romantic game, it's played by 1.8 million people a day, just huge audience, mostly of American women. I joined the Romantic Novelists Association because I thought, well, that's kind of funny. I like getting in places that I shouldn't be. I got into Amazon HQ once, like the top floor, just because I was bored. Anyway, I digress. So I got into the Romantic Novelists Association, and then they asked me to talk about games writing. So I was their first games writer. But I went to their conference, and part of the admission fee was that you get to apply for one-to-ones with agents and with publishers from across the publishing industry. And so you have to submit a synopsis, and then if they like your synopsis, they'll read like 10,000 words of a novel of yours, and then they'll give you feedback. And at least one person will be forced to give you feedback on your 10,000 words. So I was like, oh goodness, okay, I can't pass up this opportunity. I wrote a synopsis and 10,000 words and sent them in. And I actually got meetings with 4 different people, 3 Big 5 publishers, and all of whom told me they would publish my book, but I needed to get an agent, and 1 agent who was like, sign me up. You've got promises from 3 Big 5 publishers. I then had to finish the book because I really only written 10,000 words. And I got myself a completely different Big 5 publisher. Actually, I'm published by HarperCollins, and I've got my agent. And yeah, now I've written my book, it's published. Sorry, that's a really long story. It's quite lengthy, but it is not quite typical because most people, I don't know, strive for a long, long time. It's not easy usually to get a publishing deal, but it did come annoyingly easily for me.
No, this is incredible. So you said you came to these meetings with these publishers already with having written some part of the book.
Yeah, you are supposed to have written the whole book. That is standard. So normally you would have your 65,000 words minimum written, and they would be like, oh yes. So they call it requesting a full. So when you get feedback from an agent, they'll kind of feedback on your first little bit, and they'll say, I would like a full manuscript, please. I was a bit stuffed with that because I had not written a full manuscript at all. So it's very unusual. I didn't actually go with the agent that I met at the conference because she turned out she was ill and she went off. And again, this is where my story veers desperately off track from the usual. I didn't realize till afterwards that the email that I sent was called a query, and that you would send out, you track your queries. There's even a website called Query Tracker that everyone uses. I just sent what I thought was just an email. I looked at a few listicles online of like the biggest literary agencies in the UK, and then I kind of cross-referenced a bit. I picked about 4 or 5, and then I just emailed them a really long rambling email, and it went something along the lines of, hi, I'm just a content designer, just this random human woman, and I went to a conference, and then I repeated that whole story that I just told you. And yeah, I got an agent off that, like I think one of the first 3 people that read it, and I'd BCC'd like 4 of them. I didn't even make it bespoke. It's terrible, really. But yeah, usually people send hundreds of those, and they send them in tranches, and it's like a whole thing, and they perfect them using other beta readers and stuff, but I didn't do any of that. And I just forwarded the 10,000 words I'd written for the conference. And then my poor agent had to kind of beat me with a stick, essentially, to get me to write the next 55,000. Yeah, it's a bit cheeky. It's not your typical journey. Yeah, bit weird.
Has romantic fiction always been a genre you were immersed in or a fan of?
Yes, I absolutely love romantic fiction. The reason I love it is it's so different from everything else I do. It's true escapism. And the interesting thing about romantic kind of fiction, romantic novels, is that they are really looked down upon by certain people. They are absolutely feminist literature. They are very much designed primarily for the female gaze. They're pure escapism. And it's really been interesting because, you know, in my personal life, the only people I speak to about romantic fiction are, like, I don't know, my mother and my female friends. And then I joined the Romantic Novelists Association, and everyone there is obviously very positive about romances because they're writing them. I didn't realize until I went into publishing how people who write for or read other genres really look down on romantic novels as an art form. They don't see it as an art form at all. They see it as a commercial and therefore a bad thing. But it's, yeah, especially kind of writers and readers of literary fiction, there's this feeling that if you read romances, they're not as worthwhile. You're not going to get as much sort of intellectually from them. And I find that absolutely fascinating because, I don't know, I suppose people look down on Marvel films in the same way, but readers of Marvel comics would equally strongly uphold them as an art form and as something worthwhile. But I think there's an extra kind of strong tint, flavour of misogyny attached to romantic novels because they are purely for women and about romance. It's been really interesting because I suppose I was so innocent of that when I started out, and it's a whole new area of misogyny I was just not aware of.
As you start writing your novel, are there certain tenets or pillars or milestones that you need to hit when you're writing romantic fiction that you had to sort of like, oh, yeah, this needs to do this and this and this?
Yes. Oh my goodness. So when I started writing, obviously I had no clue what I was doing, except that I did because I've read so much romantic fiction. After I'd written my first novel, I found out about something which is called Romancing the Beat. And it's named after a book by a woman called Romancing the Beat. It's essentially the Bible of writing romantic novels in that it gives you the structure. It's really similar to the hero's journey, actually. Not the heroine's journey, but the hero's journey. And it gives you that kind of, you have the meet cute where the hero and heroine meet, and then they actually kind of separate and sort of like, oh no, actually, I don't like you at all. And then they bond together again. And there is this very defined structure of most romantic novels that I find absolutely fascinating. And actually it's very similar to, you know, I don't want to bring this back to design too strongly, but obviously everything, there's like a theme running through all of our lives, and in the same way there's a theme between sort of content design and novel writing, in that essentially you have your rules, you have your style guide as to romance that readers recognize even if they don't realize that it's there. You sort of are looking for it as a reader. So when I wrote it, my first book, The Regency Switch, it was all there. And then I found out about Romancing the Beat, and I was like, oh my goodness, not only is this what I've been reading this whole time, but it's also what I've written. So now I use my super sticky post-its, and for each of the beats laid out in Romancing the Beat, I kind of draft my story in chapters, and I mess with it because we always mess with things depending on, you know, stuff, what's going on, who our readers are, what our genre is. But it's really interesting that there is this like very clear framework, and anyone interested in romantic novels, writing, reading should read Romancing the Beat, because it's fascinating when you realize there is this very set structure to it.
You said that, you had your 10,000 words and then your agent basically sat you down and said, okay, you need to finish this book. What was that process like?
Well, it was like running my nails across a chalkboard. Honestly, it was so painful because it's one thing starting a book, and they say, oh, everyone has a book in them. Okay. I actually agree with that. Everyone has so many stories about their life and stories in them. Stories are everywhere. But finishing a book, oh, it's so hard. I mean, it's so much harder than you think. And I think because I'm used to deleting words, adding them, adding needless, unnecessary words, I find excruciating. But actually, when I write, I see each chapter as almost as a scene. So I spent so long working for the BBC, and when I was there, a lot of what I was doing was writing for video, writing for animations, writing for little games and stuff. And so you're writing these individual little scenes, 3-minute scenes. And then, of course, the media we consume in our everyday lives, if you're watching TV, you're seeing chunks really that are glued together. And so my first book, I wrote it like that. I wrote individual scenes, and each one I was so pleased with. They were little gems. But then I realized that to create a whole story, I had to glue them all together. And that was the excruciating part. So most of it I did at home, and my 11-year-old daughter has this really funny impression of me. So I sit there on the sofa and have my laptop on my cross legs, and I'll sit there typing very seriously. And then every now and then I'll giggle, like, hee hee hee, and then I go back to serious typing because I'm laughing at my own jokes, which is such a no-no. I got all my little scenes like that, but then my agent, she's what we call like an editorial agent. So she sat down to finesse the story with me. I was so lucky. I went to her office in London for the day, and we just sat down in a closed meeting room, and I sat there with Marina with 2 laptops working through the document, pair writing essentially, and then her poor assistant Benedict would bring us coffees. And it did get to a point where I thought to myself, who is this woman? So a good agent, a proper agent and a proper publisher, a writer will never pay a single penny. That's how it should be. When you're a writer, there are so many people that want to fleece you out of money to write your book, to publish your book. But I did this through traditional publishing routes, and I didn't have a beta reader. I didn't have anyone. I didn't pay any editors or anything. So it did get to this point where I was sitting in this very nice office in Soho with this very posh woman with her assistant and shelves full of books by very famous authors, just spending a whole day going through my book. And I thought, who is this woman that can spend so much time, because time is money, on just sitting down with me and my silly little book that I wrote by accident? I think we'll all agree it paid off now. I've certainly had my first royalty check, and I'm thinking, okay, this is fine. This has paid off. But it was such a gamble from her, and I'm really grateful. And that was really what got it finished. But now I've written 2 books, and book 2 is much easier. Book 2, I have not really needed any assistance with. It's gone all the way through to copy edit without any major feedback, because, I just learned and listened really hard when I got feedback about my first novel. And now I'm thinking about my third. And I have a novella coming out around Christmas. It's top secret. Can't tell you any more about that. But yes, I have that too.
Anyone who creates something and puts something out there for other people to experience, you have to have this audacity, this hubris that other people will be interested in that you're creating something that others want to experience. How was that journey for you of I'm assuming there's ups and downs of, I have this wonderful idea, other people should read that.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing. It's a really weird, it's so strange writing books. At least for me it is. A lot of people write novels and they believe very strongly in themselves, and you have to have this really strong self-belief that people want to read what you've written. I think sometimes people are motivated by having a story they need to tell. I'm not motivated either by a belief that I need the world to read my story, or the belief that I have some really important story to tell. It's a weird one. I have major imposter syndrome, actually. so when it comes to charging my day rate, I know that I'm worth that, and I don't have a moment's pause in insisting that I am remunerated fairly for the value I bring. I have no imposter syndrome about that at all. But with my book, I suppose I viewed it as a fun adventure. And that's the story I told you right now, right? I started off with this fun COVID letter, and then, oh my goodness, whoopsie, here I am with a publishing deal. A librarian called me once the L Woods of the L Woods of authors. And that's funny to me because I've also been described in the UK as the Miriam Margolyes of content design. They are so different, right? So, but I am with publishing. I suppose I'm motivated by the gratitude I have towards other romantic novelists. And that sounds really weird and probably unbelievably altruistic, as in nobody would believe it. But I suppose I've taken so much comfort from other people's romantic novels in the past. And I'm so grateful for what they've seen me through. I mean, in the last year alone, so many terrible things have happened. My life is crazy. So I had my 5-year-old niece, unfortunately, Rosie got brain cancer and died, which was just horrendous, and lots of fundraising and money raising for Rosie. And then, we've moved house. My husband was off work for 6 months. Before that, his grandmother died. Just been one thing after another, I guess. And romantic novels, no matter what I've been through, they've always been there for me. When I have had a rough time at work, when someone in my family has been ill, or, God forbid, people die. When I was younger, when I was bullied at school, when I, didn't get the exam results that I wanted, all of these times romantic novels have been there for me. And so it felt like paying back in some way the happiness and the relief and the comfort that I've taken. And I was secondhand book shopping just today at a local craft and antiques place. And every time I see stacks of secondhand books, I get really emotional. My husband has to kind of tear me away, because the hope has always been that I would go into a secondhand bookshop or a charity shop and see my book there for like 50 pence or free, even, for someone to just take and have that moment of comfort, that one evening, that aeroplane flight. I make money off my day job. I do very well for myself. So my book, if I could give it away for free, I would. However, my agent insists I do not. And I get, the original plan as well when I wrote it was I thought, I'll just email a few agents, a couple of agents, and if none of them replies, then I'll put it on Kindle Unlimited for free, because it's fine. And yeah, it just so happened that an agent did reply, and it's been a huge adventure. Like, maybe nobody would have read it if it went on Kindle. And that's the weird pressure of it, really, is that now that I have an agent, now that I have a publisher, then it goes from something that was purely a hobby and a fun thing like it that I thought I would explore, into a whole money-making engine, with film rights being explored and TV rights, and I have audiobooks, and I can walk into a bookshop and my book will be in there, which is really unbelievable to me. But I don't think it takes away from the hobbiness of it, but it makes my relationship with my readers quite different, I think. Yeah.
Is it something that you're considering, becoming a full-time novelist, or are you trying to keep it a bit at arm's length because of that?
Oh my goodness. If I could become a full-time romantic novelist, I would jump at it. It's weird. This is the thing. I really can't level with myself where I sit with it, because I'd love to be doing it full-time. And in order to do it full-time, it has to be commercially viable. That's just the fact. And so I'd love to do it because I want to lie on a chaise lounge with my pearl necklace, my bright red lipstick. I have my Chanel lipstick. I'm all prepared for this. I don't have a puffy little dog, but I can get one. That's fine. I look around some rescue shelters. But I really love content design. It's so nerdy. I love my day job. I really, really love it. and it pays the bills. It's kind of great. So, I mean, I'm lucky in a way in that becoming a full-time romantic novelist is a ways on the horizon, unless I get picked up by, like, in the same way that Julia Quinn did with Bridgerton. It's not going to happen. And in fact, even then, Julia Quinn had written at least a dozen books by the time she was picked up. Most romantic novelists are on their fifth or sixth book before they can afford to give up the day job, because although it, brings in money, it doesn't bring in nearly enough to sustain your family. But I'm lucky enough to really love my day job. Like, I absolutely adore it. I think it's perfect for me. And I find so much satisfaction. I find so much joy in just doing what I do. So I'm kind of happy doing both for now. I also have wildly untamed, uncontrolled ADHD. So I think only doing one and not the other would leave me with too much spare time.
I think we've gone long enough in this podcast without even talking about the book. So I think it's time. Can you give us the elevator pitch, the quick synopsis of what is the book about?
Right. So there's the very, very short elevator pitch for the Regency Switch, which is Freaky Friday meets Bridgerton. And then there's a slightly longer one, which is, what if, as a modern woman used to all the more cons, you were suddenly pitched into the Regency era? I like to think about it when I watch Bridgerton. Oh, wouldn't it be nice to be whirling around in ball dresses, all the handsome lords and stuff? But there were no toilets. There were no knickers. They didn't have like modern knickers. It would be a thing. And certainly as a woman, you start thinking, oh my goodness, actually, no, maybe this wouldn't be quite as romantic. So I thought, well, let's try it out. Let's write a rom-com about a woman who finds herself pitched into Regency life. But then, of course, if you had a woman that just went missing because she disappeared into the Regency era, there'd be such a big missing persons inquiry. Like, you can't just have a whole, but even if they don't really have many friends or colleagues or whatever, you can't just have a whole person go missing. So I had a swap with a girl from the Regency era who had accidentally invented time travel. And then just ensuing shenanigans. Basically, that's what happens. Two women swap 200 years apart, and they get up to stuff and just explore what it's like to live in a different era. And one gets to live her Regency fantasy, albeit without toilets, and the other gets to do things that women couldn't do in the Regency era, like be obviously an openly lesbian and have medication that helps you with your mental health issues. So yeah, everyone gets something out of it, and it's fun, and it's the kind of thing that you pick up and right from the cover, from the very colours of the cover, it's coded, it's all perfect. There's going to be a happy ever after, and there is. And that's not too much of a spoiler for any reader of romances, because that's very much what you hope for. Not so much an elevator pitch as like one of those airport escalator pitches, but you get the gist.
I'm actually curious to know, because we've only talked about romantic fiction. How much did, I would say, the sci-fi elements, how much were they part of the story going into it? Is it something that you knew this is going to be not your traditional romantic novel?
Yeah, so I don't know how my strange little brain came up with this concept at all. But because I'm, I don't know, quite a literal person also, and quite a logical person, I had to think, how would it happen? I can't just do, ooh, and magic. It doesn't work for me quite like that. And originally it was going to be way more sci-fi, in that I came up with this really detailed explanation of how she tapped into mycelial networks. Ancient mycelial networks that gathered time together, and kind of slightly inspired by Star Trek, actually, or at least my husband pointed out afterwards I probably had been inspired by Star Trek. He's such a killjoy. But my agent was like, no, Helen, you've made a rom-com. You have to choose. You can either choose sci-fi completely or rom-com completely. Maybe if you get a toe in the door of this whole genre, you get a little bit of sci-fi, then you can widen that out over time. And that's what I have done. But you have to have a kind of, you can't just have a cold open. You have to wedge your way in there and grow it. So initially it's through the means of a golden bracelet. And the idea is that you put the golden bracelet on, it transports you through time. And there are lots of jokes in it actually about how she did it, but I never actually reveal it. If you break the bracelet, then it sends you back. But you're able to carefully remove it through the actual hook and eye. Otherwise, imagine you'd be asleep and it would fall off and oh my goodness, your whole life would be ruined. You've been taken back in time. I do make quite a lot of jokes about how, did you not work out how to do it yet? Oh, did you not work out the alchemistic, kind of formula of whatever? But obviously I never reveal how exactly it works. And it's kind of hilarious how many reviews I've had that are like, I love this book, brilliant. It was brilliant, but I only wish that she'd stopped to really explore how the time travel worked. And I'm like, my dudes, if I knew how time travel worked, I would not be here. I'd be at NASA by now. I wouldn't be here writing rom-coms, but fine. But yeah, and then with book 2, which is going to be, I can exclusively tell you, called The Summer Season, I go into it a bit more because people are kind of on board, hopefully, with the concept by now that you can time travel using jewelry. And then I explore a little bit more about how that might have happened. Because I had to do it again. I mean, I didn't have to. I could have just sat at home watching TV. But I did. And so I do explain a bit more. Yeah.
You mentioned earlier the famous phrase, everyone has a book in them. And you obviously had this book in you. What do you think of yourself is in this book? Not necessarily like, oh, this is exactly what happened to me. I'm actually from the Regency period. But where do you recognize Helen in this book?
Oh my goodness, that's such a good question. I'm everywhere in this book. I have not, with any of my characters, based them on somebody I know or somebody I once knew. I just can't. I can't relate my book to everyday life. It's something completely separate. And so every single one of my characters, I think, is a different element of either my personality, someone I want to be, and by accident hate being, or would avoid being at all costs. It's really, really weird. A book is incredibly personal. It doesn't matter what it's about. With this book, what I think is interesting is, although I knew I had a book in me, I don't think it was necessarily just this book. I think life is all about stories. It's about the stories you tell yourself. It's the stories you tell other people. Everything to me, I see stories everywhere. This was just one of many. I always have about 3 or 4 books in my head at any one time. This was the one that I felt like writing when I sat down that one weekend to write my 10,000 words. And every single character in the book is part of me, even though they're completely different. I think everyone has so many different facets to themselves, parts that you show other people, parts that you show maybe people at one job and then you move to a different job and you realise you have to become a different person. Also, as someone who is neurodiverse, I'm always masking. I'm always having to show people a different version of myself. So I have 2 heroines who are both kind of me, even though they're very different. One is the introverted, staying at home, quiet version of me that nobody really gets to see. And the other one is the whoops, oh my goodness, stumbling from disaster to disaster version of me that I like to show people as an excuse. I mean, I like to pretend I'm bumbling around, and sometimes I am. But I don't know, I think probably the realistic view is that I'm between those 2 characters. The one exception is that after I wrote my male hero, because there are 2 love interests, one is a woman, one is a man, and my male hero, my husband said something the other day that made me realise I'd written my male hero to be my husband, who I'm very happy with. So it makes sense, that I'm satisfied with his performance, 10 out of 10. Therefore, it makes sense I would write him into my hero's role. And my husband likes to describe himself as being in the splash zone. In that he's a very patient man, and he just kind of sits there and absorbs the kind of whatever is going on with me, dolphins / whales splashing around, and he just gets caught in it. And I was really worried about that, but then he described to me, well, actually, you can choose whether or not you're in the splash zone. Like when you're in the splash zone at a sea parks, it's because you chose to be there. And it made me feel better about that. But I also realized that my hero is very much I'm going to observe this nonsense. He's not one of those rippling abs, rescuing the woman type heroes. I'm not down with that. I don't need anyone to rescue me, but I do really appreciate someone being in the splash zone. So that's my hero. But yeah, apart from that, every single character has some of me in. And that's not to flatter myself. I have a real villain in the book called Miss Maria Marley, and she's quite evil. And I put all the bitchiest, awfulest, nastiest pieces of myself in her and had her really properly be nasty. But yeah, I then made her the heroine of my second book, The Summer Season. So it kind of equals out. I give her redemption arc in the end.
Before we wrap up, you mentioned in the beginning that romantic novels are largely misunderstood by large groups in the population. I'd love to hear from you. What are some recommendations you'd make for people? Here are some romantic novels that might give you something else to think about, might give you a second look into what romance fiction can be.
Oh my goodness. It's my dream question. So what I would really, really like is for people who have read a bit of Jane Austen before as a younger person to come back to Jane Austen as an older person and think, instead of thinking I'm going to read, and I think my prime example is Northanger Abbey. A lot of people read Northanger Abbey, which is a Jane Austen novel about a young woman who sets off for a larger town, Bath, and kind of falls in love. And she goes to stay at this house called Northanger Abbey. And it's all of Jane Austen's novels are perceived by the vast majority of people to be romantic novels. But when you revisit them as an older person, you see that they are absolute biting commentaries on society and that they last throughout time. Just the name of Pride and Prejudice, it's a romance, but then you look at the name of it, it's about the interactions between Pride and Prejudice, how those affect people's interactions with each other and their life and their choices. Northanger Abbey is absolutely the gold standard for me because you can easily read it and go, oh, it's a silly romance. But Jane Austen, throughout the novel, kind of has these little descriptive passages that actually show you that it's a story about being young and about kind of not really understanding or being an innocent person, and how life is so much more complicated. And it's a real coming of age story, actually, but it's also a romance. And that's the thing about romance, is it's never just a romance, not really. So let me think of another one. Oh, one of my favourite, if you were to read a single Georgette Heyer novel, I would recommend one called The Unknown Ajax, or another one, Cotillion. And both of them, yes, they're romances, but they're also about people and about how people are perceived and how, so The Unknown Ajax is about arguably a man who goes to a stately home and he's thought to be kind of just a commoner, and he's inherited the stately home. But actually, because they've all gone on with a snobby attitude, they've kind of not realized that he's not a commoner. He's actually very well educated and he's making fun of all of them the whole way through. And it's a romance, but it's also commentary on kind of the British class system and snobbery, and it's about not seeing people as two-dimensional. I think that's really, really common. My agent has this view, right, that romantic literature has some of the best and most nuanced commentary on society as a whole. And we do this through the means of a romance, but you can't write a romance without saying something about life, because to fall in love is the most human thing that you really can do. It's such a human and universal experience. Not wholly universal, but largely universal. And those emotions and those feelings, there is no way of expressing those that doesn't reflect on some other facet of humanity. And the last thing I really would say about romantic fiction is, so there are a lot of tropes in romance that people consider to be quite poisonous. Tropes about men being quite mean to women and behaving in quite toxic ways. But actually, those men, when you read a full romance, the story arc always ends up with them changing. And I like to think that for women, it's quite a safe and hopeful space to be in, because the dream is to be in a space where men can start off with these toxic beliefs that so many men in real life do have, but they can change. And in reality, we know they can't change. We don't need telling that men often do not change, or that you cannot change a person. But it's nice to be able to read in a safe space a book where there is a fantasy where people do change, and you can have a happy ever after, and you can have that, because we're not stupid. We know that reality isn't like that, but romance gives people that fantasy, that ability to kind of relax and feel like actually everything will end up okay. Yeah, I love romance. It's fantastic. And I wish people wouldn't be so snobby, because so much of it is so incredibly well written. And yeah, Jane Austen, Georgette Heyer are two of my favourites.
Helen, where can people find you?
People can find me in any bookshop, Helen Gaskell, the Regency Switch, but also at helengaskellwriter.co.uk, or if you're looking for top-notch public sector content design services, you can find me just at helengaskell.co.uk. If you're not sure how to spell Gaskell, just look up popular romantic novelist from the Victorian era, Mrs. Elizabeth Gaskell, and my surname's spelt the same way as her because my husband is related to her, which is very cool.
I'm looking forward to the revelation that your book is actually based on you and her switching bodies.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. You know what? That would be fun. And I have thought about taking a classic novel, North and South, and doing something fun with that. Maybe for book 3. Let's see.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
You are more than welcome. I've had such a lovely time. It's been lovely to meet you.
This is all for this episode of Design Downtime. Thank you for joining me. And until next time, I hope you enjoy your downtime.